What can you tell us in terms of who you think a year or two from now will have the biggest user base and be the most innovative amongst that quartet? Or maybe you think there's other players who will emerge?
The advantage that OpenAI has, which is the advantage that any, call it emerging, advantage competitor has,
outsider,
is that the incumbents are handicapped by their current scale. Much of the consideration set that Google has had in deciding what features and tools to launch with respect to AI over the last couple of years has been driven fundamentally by a concern about public policy and public reaction. And I know this from speaking to folks there that are close enough to kind of indicate, like, Google has been so targeted, has been such the point of attack by governments around the world with respect to their scale and monopoly and monopolistic kind of behavior, as some people have framed it, privacy concerns, et cetera, et cetera. The fines in the EU are extraordinary. That so much of what goes on at Google today is, can I get approval to do this? And so many people have felt so frustrated that they can't actually unleash the toolkit that Google has built. And so they've been harnessed and focused on these internal capabilities. I think I mentioned this in the past, but things like, what's the right video to show on YouTube to keep people engaged? What's the right ad to show to increase click-through rates, et cetera, versus building great consumer products for fear of the backlash that would arise and governments coming down on them and ultimately attacking the revenue and the core revenue stream. And this is no different than any other kind of innovator's dilemma. Any other business of scale in any other industry historically ultimately gets disrupted because their job at that point is to protect their cash flow and their revenue stream and their balance and their assets, not to disrupt themselves, especially as a public company, especially under the scrutiny and the watchful eye of governments and regulators. So I think Google has, in aggregate, probably good competitive talent, if not better talent, than OpenAI and others. Google has arguably the best corpus of data upon which to train, the best capabilities, the best toolkit, the best hardware,
biggest user
the
base,
lowest cost for running these sorts of models, the lowest cost for serving them, et cetera, et cetera. So frankly, they're way behind. The battle is theirs to lose if they are willing to disrupt themselves. And this is the moment that Larry and Sergey should wield those founders' shares that they have. And they should wield the comments that they wrote in that founders' letter, that they will always make the right decision for the long term for this company, even if it means taking a cost in the short term and disrupting themselves. This is the moment to prove that those founders' shares were worth, the negotiation to get there. And I think that it is going to require a real degree of scrutiny, a real degree of regulatory uncertainty, a real degree of challenge by governments and public policy people, and perhaps even a revenue hit in the near term to realize the opportunity. But I do think that they're better equipped to win if they chose to. There is an institutional problem at Google at the top level, which does need to be solved, which is this position of constantly being in defense against the scrutiny, again, of regulators and public policy folks and all these different groups that are against Google. And so as a result, the kind of cultural seasoning, particularly at the executive and the board level, has been one of protect the nest, don't overreach, don't overstep. And it's a real, I think one for the business school books or whatever, ultimately is what they end up doing about it. Because now is, the time when that defensive posture is really kind of putting the entire business at risk.
The same thing happened to Microsoft, remember, in the late 90s?
That's right.
When they got crushed by that antitrust lawsuit. It made them very defensive.
Well, but that consent decree...
They had a wartime CEO come in, Ballmer came in, and, followed by kind of an innovative guy who could kind of continue to build. And I think that there may be a moment here. I love Sundar. He's a great guy, great CEO. Sundar and I don't know if I ever told you this, he and I started at Google on the same day. We were both in the same nuclear class. We wore the friggin' hat on the TGIF day and on stage. He was a product manager and now he runs the company. But I think the question is whether it's the CEO or the broader whole kind of executive org or the board, a degree of disruption necessary to shift that cultural seasoning is so necessary right now for them to have a shot at this. And similar to what you just said, Sachs, you're going to need a Ballmer type moment to kind of, reinvigorate that business. And by the way, I'll
more
tell
of a
you,
Satya moment, I think, than
more of a Satya moment.
Well, yeah, because it's an important point. When Ballmer took over during that period after Gates, when they were on their heels, he basically just focused on revenue and paying dividends and stock buybacks, and the stock went sideways, and he missed mobile. And now,
it's a good point, Jacob. Yeah.
You know,
well, wait, you're forgetting one big thing, which is that was also because he had to operate under a consent decree to the DOJ.
Exactly.
So the product managers of Microsoft were replaced with lawyers from the Department of Justice, and you had to get their sign-off before you could ship anything. So we have to remember that those things probably slowed Microsoft down as well. And the great thing that Satya had was a blank slate and the removal of that consent decree. So he was able to do everything that just made a lot of sense, and he's executed flawlessly. I think the problem at Google is not Sundar or Larry or Sergey. I think it's more in the deep bowels of middle management of that company, which is that there's just far too many people that probably have an opinion, and their opinion is not shrouded in survival. Their opinion is shrouded in elite language around what is the moral and ethical implications of this, and where has this been properly tested on the diaspora of 19 different ethnic tribes of the Amazon? That's the kind of decision-making that is a nice to have when you are the second or third most valuable technology company in the world. But you have to be able to pause that kind of thinking and instead get into wartime survival mode. And it's very hard. So it doesn't almost matter at this point what Sundar wants. The real question is, what is the capability of middle management to either do it or get out of the way? And I think that in all of these big companies that struggle, what you really see is an inability for middle management to get out of the way, or frankly, just you need somebody to then fire them. And if you look at folks who get their groove back, let's see what Facebook does. What are they targeting? They're targeting middle management. If you look at what Elon does in the companies that he owns, there is virtually no middle management. It's like, get out of the way.
Build product
and ship it.
Yeah.
And what is the core truth? And so if failure is there in front of you, and if David is right that you have 200 million users come out of nowhere who are voting every day with their time and attention to use an app, and that doesn't create a five-alarm fire where you get middle management out of the way and you are the senior most people talking to the people doing the work and shipping things every day, you are toast. You are toast.
I think Google was caught completely flat-footed here, even though they shouldn't have been, because they published the original paper on transformers in 2017. They should have seen where all of this was going, but they didn't. OpenAI used that paper and commercialized it. And the proof of that is there was just a lawsuit a couple of days ago, or at least a claim by a former employee of Google who quit because he said that they were using ChatGPT to train their AI. So their AI is so far behind. They were violating the terms of use. Hold on. They were violating the terms of use of OpenAI to train their own AI on ChatGPT. That's not a good sign. That's not a good sign. I also think
it's nonsense.
Hold on. I'm just making the counter argument here. I mean, don't dismiss it out of hand. Give me a chance to explain it. Moreover, ChatGPT 4, which was just released a few weeks ago, we know that OpenAI had that. They were using it internally for 7 months. So the state of the art is not what we're using. It's what OpenAI has internally. They're obviously working now on ChatGPT 5. And so if you're saying that Bard is 80% of ChatGPT 4, well, I got news for you. It's probably 50% or 20% of ChatGPT 5. And who knows what the product roadmap is inside of OpenAI. I am sure that they've got 200 ideas for things they could do to make it better and low-hanging fruit. But look, regardless, I think the pace of innovation here and development is going to speed up massively. I mean, there is going to be a flurry of activity. I agree it's hard to know exactly how it's going to play out, but I think this idea that, it's a foregone conclusion these big companies are just going to catch up with OpenAI, I think that there's a strong counter argument